Good morning, everybody. We will get started. My name is Elizabeth Bernhard, and I am the Executive Director of the Manufacturing Growth Alliance, or MGA. MGA is a statewide trade association exclusively dedicated to the unique needs of Michigan's small to medium-sized manufacturers. We're really excited that you joined us for this conversation. I'm very excited about it. We have great team members, great colleagues joining us today. A few housekeeping items. You'll see at the bottom of the screen, there's that chat button, which we all know so very well by now. As we are going through the presentation, please submit your questions directly into the chat box. We will hold them until the very end of the presentation when we will have a formal Q&A. As you can see, we are recording this session and it will be shared to MGA's YouTube channel on today or tomorrow. In addition, you will receive copies of today's slides. With that, I'm very happy to introduce my team here today, Brian Bellware, Managing Principal with Gibson, and Bruce Tapp, President of Fasco Industries. Brian, thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks, Elizabeth. We are excited to join the MGA and share some really exciting stories throughout the conversation today. And joining me is one of our partners in the community, Bruce Tapp. And so, Bruce, I'm going to turn it over to you and allow you to say a quick hello and introduction, and then I'll get started.
Well, thank you very much for having me today. I'm Bruce Tapp, and I am President and CEO of Fasco Industries. We're a manufacturer of special fasteners in Grand Rapids, Michigan. It's a family-owned business that I've been on and off associated with since 1970. My dad and a partner started the business. And just a quick note of why I'm here today. 2017, I decided to kind of take over the benefits function in our company again. And I really got involved and really wanted to have an impact on reform and change. And so that's why I'm here today. Thanks, Brian.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Bruce. And as Elizabeth said, my name is Brian Bellware. I'm the Managing Principal for Gibson. We are a commercial risk management and employee benefit consulting firm. And our office in West Michigan is in the Kalamazoo area, corporately headquartered in South Bend, Indiana, and we serve clients all over the country in a variety of industries, but manufacturing is certainly one of our largest industry niches. So we're excited to share a little bit more on this topic, People First Health Plans. So from an agenda standpoint, we're going to just chat a little bit for a few minutes on what's going on in the market, provide everybody with a synopsis on some things that we see going on in the market right now that are relevant for group health plan sponsors. We're going to hear from Bruce and share a little bit more on why this matters, why manufacturing and other leaders should be caring about this topic and how it impacts business. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the outcomes that Fasco has been able to achieve within their health plan. And then we're going to dive into 5 strategies that plan sponsors can adopt to build a people first health plan. And then we will have 10 to 15 minutes towards the end for open Q&A. So jot your questions down as we go, and we'll certainly be addressing those questions towards the end. So let's jump in. And Warren Buffett always said there's 2 sides to every coin, price and value. Price is what you get, or price is what you pay, value is what you get. And so when we think about employer-sponsored healthcare, price is the premiums that we pay to an insurance carrier, or if we're a self-insured plan, kind of the total cost of claims and fixed cost. And when we think about the trend in premiums or price, we can look at this blue line here that goes up over the past 20 years or so. Premiums have gone up 355%. On the other side of the coin, we often measure the value of our health plans through the deductible. That's one metric, certainly not the only one, but a very strong metric in terms of the value of a group health plan. And that is this top blue line, and deductibles have gone up 473% over the last 20 years. You can see how that trend has fared compared to wages and inflation. So we see a very concerning trend that prices are going up and values going down. And so when we talk to group health plan sponsors and we look at that trend of rising prices, and eroding value, most plan sponsors would acknowledge that that's an unsustainable trend, meaning we can't continue to have these expenses impact our operating budget, impact our business, restrict growth and ways of investing into our workforce, while at the same time, we no longer can continue to erode the value and expect to leverage benefits as a tool to attract and retain talent. And so if this trend is unsustainable, what can we do about it? And where is the market going? We would expect that if we continue to do the same things, we're going to continue to get the same results. Meaning, if we continue to purchase healthcare through the same vehicles, through the same means as we always have for the past 20 years, we're going to see those trends continue. Cost is going to continue to rise, value is going to continue to erode. But what's exciting for us and what we're seeing in the market, what we're leading and bringing to organizations like Fastco, and we'll hear Bruce share a little bit more of their story throughout today, is there are ways to begin to stabilize this trend and begin to actually lower costs while improving value for our people. And so we're excited to share a little bit on how we're doing that. A couple of the big trends right now that we see in the market. Number one, the cost of healthcare is rising faster than any other part of our economy. So labor is a big piece of that. Market consolidations, we're seeing a lot of hospitals and health systems acquire, merge, get acquired by private equity. A lot of independent practices that used to be creating competition within local markets. We're starting to see that consolidation. All of those things are contributing to ultimately rising costs. We also see pharmacy drugs, high cost branded specialty drugs. Oftentimes these are treating rare diseases, which is awesome in that we now have treatments for diseases that we previously have not been able to treat, but that comes with a price tag, and that price is falling on that commercial market and plan sponsors. And so these are some things that are contributing. Weight loss drugs would be a prime example. Some of the GLP-1 weight loss drugs are really impacting the commercial market and plan sponsors from a cost standpoint. So there's a lot of variables at play in terms of what's driving these cost increases. And there are viable strategies, proven strategies that can be used to begin to address these things, both from a cost and value standpoint. So at this time, what I'd like to do is just turn it over to Bruce. And Bruce, you have, as you mentioned, kind of taken over the employee benefit strategy since 2017. So solving this challenge has really been a passion of yours for several years. And your team has built an incredible health plan that we'll unpack as we go throughout the webinar today. But before we get into the mechanics of your health plan, let's start with the why. And so as a business owner and leader, can you share a little bit more about the why for your health plan and for Fastco?
Yeah, sure. Caring about people is really important to our organization. It builds loyalty, and we all know that you need loyal employees in this environment. I had an employee about a little over a year ago, was diagnosed with cancer. And at the time, we had added a primary care program that I'll talk a little bit more about later. And he came to me, I don't know, a couple months ago and said, literally, the nurse that we have here, he literally saved my life. And I thought, boy, that's a pretty awesome statement. But I think it summarizes, the type of caring we want to provide for our employees.
That's awesome. And we see here on the slide a picture of your team getting involved in the community. We know for business owners and leaders too, especially working with their HR teams, that benefits is a tool to attract and retain talent. Can you talk a little bit about that angle of it as well?
I think we all know it's really a jungle out there right now in terms of attracting employees, and I don't think I really need to quote statistics in order to prove that it's difficult to recruit and it's difficult to retain employees. So having a better benefit package is obviously going to give you a leg up in terms of the talent that's out there. But at the same time, I'm sure a lot of you have already reached into their pocketbooks and had to boost wages in the last several years. So just opening up the pocketbook and providing a superior benefit plan that way, you know, that's probably not the best strategy in the long run, because you're going to start taking away resources that you need for other parts of your business. So the real question is, well, how do you kind of thread that needle? How do you provide a better benefit plan, but not break the bank? One of the things we did several years ago is, you know, we were fully funded. We were a fully funded plan. And if we've got employers on this call that are on fully funded plans, you kind of know what I'm talking about. Your carrier would come to you every year with a pretty large increase. A lot of times for us, it was a double-digit increase. And we didn't really have a clear understanding of what was really fueling that increase. You know, because we just didn't know. And so what I would do as an employer, I'd run different scenarios. Well, let's increase the deductibles. Let's increase copays. Let's change the plan design so that we have a less rich benefit structure. And so we would do those things, we would pull those levers, and maybe we'd get the increase down to 8 or 9%. And we thought, well, that's pretty good. It's under double digits. And then we just forget about it until the next year. Well, the big losers were the employees, because they were paying more for really less coverage. They would have more taken out of their weekly paychecks. They'd have higher copays, increased deductibles. And I'm sure a lot of you know exactly what I'm talking about. So when I took over in 2017, one of the first things that we did is we moved away from a fully funded plan. And one of the reasons we did that is that when you're on a fully funded plan, you don't really have access to your claims data. And, you know, the biggest thing driving your healthcare costs are your claims. And if you don't know what your claims data is, if you don't know what your experience is, it's kind of hard to formulate solutions. I mean, you know, is your plan suffering from high drug costs? You know, overutilization of ER visits? You have a small number of really sick people on your plan. Unless you know what the root cause is, you really don't know how to solve it. So our journey began with self-funding. Now, I'm sure some of you think, well, self-funding, that sounds really risky. I don't know if we have the financial resources available to do that. Keep in mind, however, there's lots of tools out there that would help you manage that. You know, there's individual stop loss insurance that you can take advantage of. There's aggregate stop loss insurance, and they help companies like ours and like yours mitigate the risk of self-funding. The real important thing is, with self-funding, you get that claims data, and that's just so critically important to solving some of these issues.
All right, awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that, Bruce. And so I think when we are out talking with folks, and you know, we really sit down and have an opportunity to dig in with the HR finance team, certainly the leadership. You know, we hear a similar message. You know, we want our benefits to take care of our people. They're a tool to attract and retain talent. So it's a really important part of our business. We also know on the flip side, when we look at the operating budget, it's a top 3 business expense. So it's a really important piece that we manage, not only because of the impact on the people, but also the impact on the business and the outcomes it drives. So when we think about those outcomes with Fastco, highlight a few things. There's so many pieces here that we can begin to talk about, but you know, Bruce, just give us a quick highlight of some of the real positive outcomes that you see within your plan.
Well, I think probably number one thing is that we froze employee contributions for 3 consecutive years, and I'm pretty confident that we're gonna do that next year. And we also, you know, we've reduced or waived out-of-pocket cost when we can steer people into certain high-value providers. We've got zero out-of-pocket costs for things like our high-cost brand and specialty drugs, primary care, our various labs and imaging, and second opinions. If you look over on the right side of the slide, you can see, like, for instance, last year, how our spending per employee per month stacked up against a couple of other categories. Our spending was, you know, $1,076 per month per employee. But keep in mind, that includes spouses and dependents. The TPA that we use, that is our third-party administrator, you know, their average book of business was, you know, about $150 more a month. And the national average was over $400 a month. So I think we're having an impact. You know, we're saving money, but I think we're providing better coverage, as you can see on some of the outcomes on the left-hand part of the slide.
Yeah, this is certainly a great example of being able to bring increased values, and some of the strategies that have been deployed that we'll unpack are more short term in terms of seeing immediate ROI, and some of them are a little bit more long term too. And I'll highlight one piece. Fastco's health plan was recognized by an organization called Health Rosetta as a top 50 health plan in America. And so based on the programs that have been put in place, the structure of it, and how those savings have been reinvested back into the workforce and the people, Fastco received that recognition, which is really exciting. So with the framework of why, the framework of some of the outcomes that are possible for plan sponsors and leaders to begin to achieve within their group health plan strategy, let's start unpacking some of the different components that we see. So the vast majority of plan sponsors in the market today are purchasing healthcare through an insurance product. So they're going out to a traditional carrier, they're buying either a fully insured product, maybe a self-insured, what's called an ASO, administrative services only, but they're buying a bundled insurance product. And so that's what we see represented in this thin light gray kind of segment. And because costs have been rising so rapidly over the past 20 years, in particular over the past 5 to 10 years, we're seeing the market respond with really viable solutions and alternative models. So we believe there's 5 key strategies that plan sponsors need to adopt to build a people-first health plan, meaning it's a health plan that's built for the benefit of your people, not for an insurance carrier and kind of that traditional model. So the first area is really to begin expanding your healthcare purchasing strategy. So traditional carrier models are the most expensive vehicle to purchase when you are looking at purchasing healthcare for your folks. And while there are use cases that may make the most sense to go that route, we feel like it's critical for plan sponsors really to strategically evaluate all of their options in the market and then begin to implement a multi-year strategic plan for how to begin pursuing those. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to walk completely away from carriers, and we'll talk a little bit about what that might look like. But there are alternative options available in the market, and so it's really important to understand and identify the ones that are the best fit, rather than feeling like you're stuck in a corner and you don't really have any options. We also see in a traditional model an overuse of insurance. Insurance across all categories is really designed to protect against catastrophic loss. So when you think about how you use health and how you use auto insurance for your cars, how you use homeowners insurance for your homes and other business insurance that you have, it's designed to protect against catastrophic loss. Yet in employer-sponsored healthcare, we're using insurance for everything from that $1 million catastrophic hemophiliac claim all the way down to a $100 office visit. And so what we find is that because of some of that overuse of insurance, we're actually driving premiums up. So we can begin to look at alternative ways of financing healthcare, and then really just leveraging insurance to protect against catastrophic loss. In any healthcare environment, when we begin to look at fully insured, self-insured, small group, large group, the vast majority of what you're spending money on is going towards claims. And so when we break down the healthcare dollar, we see maybe anywhere from 80 to 85% of dollars being spent on the actual healthcare claim. So this is a healthcare service in a hospital, it's a provider office visit, it's a pharmacy drug, and that is the risk that we're beginning to manage within a health plan strategy. So it's really, really important for health plan sponsors to develop a strategy to manage that risk. So we'll talk about some of those priorities, and we'll talk about some of the things that the Fasco team is doing to manage the risk of a healthcare claim. We know that if we're using benefits as a talent attraction and retention tool, that member experience has to be really positive. And so this is not something that plan sponsors should be just outsourcing to a carrier or to another source. It's really something we've got to be intentional about how we design that member experience, because in a traditional setting, it can be very overwhelming and it can be confusing, difficult to understand, difficult to actually use and get value out of. So really being intentional about that member experience is important. And then the fifth component is leadership. And so as we begin to think about doing something different than how we've done it for 20 years, it's really important to have strong leadership. And so the tools and resources that leaders leverage to begin to manage change, communicate, we're going to begin doing something different, really is different than the tools that they need to just simply buy a health insurance product. So we'll talk a little bit about some of those leadership tools. So those five strategies we think are really important, and we'll start to unpack that. Go ahead, Bruce.
And I was going to point out too, Brian, that another relationship, another part of the sightline that's really important is the relationship you have with a healthcare consultant. I didn't use the word broker. Healthcare as an industry is just rife with misaligned incentives. And it's important that, when you form a relationship with an insurance advisor or consultant, that you really know that that person is working for you and not the carriers. Now, I've had a relationship with Brian for 3 years. And one of the things that Brian does and what Gibson does is they just charge a flat PEPM compensation agreement. So they're not getting commissions per se on my healthcare spend. And so, but if you contrast that with, say, a broker who's working for a fully funded plan, this means that when your rates go up, well, guess what? Their compensation goes up as well. So you kind of think, well, are they really that broken up if I get a 12% increase? Because that means they're getting more money in commission. Someone like Brian doesn't work under the same arrangement. And I think that's really important.
Awesome. Thanks, Bruce. Yeah, and that's a big piece, and it leads well into this next part of the conversation. So as we talk about expanding your strategic sightline, the vast majority of folks in the market that are sitting in the seats that we sit in are simply selling and servicing insurance. And so what they do is they look at this group commercial kind of bucket here. And again, there are use cases for this model. So there are going to be clients and groups out there that this does make the most sense based on their strategic priorities. So I don't want to insinuate in any way that there's not a place for these folks in the market or this model. But what we find is that if that's the only bucket that you're looking at, we're missing out on some other very viable avenues to purchase healthcare for your people. And so in addition to the group commercial, which is kind of that traditional model that we're all used to, we go out to an insurance carrier, we buy that product. There are ways that groups can leverage the individual marketplace as well. So legislation that's recently been passed over the last few years allows tax advantaged subsidies from an employer to begin to use the individual marketplace. And a lot of the experts that we talk to that are familiar with the individual marketplace are seeing that rates in that market are stabilizing much faster than rates in the group commercial market. So there are viable opportunities, whether that's a full replacement of a group health plan, or you're using the individual market as seen here in kind of this overlap for certain employee populations. So there are opportunities to leverage the individual marketplace and maybe that a little bit more stable rate trend. But where we see and what Fasco has adopted is more of this group independent type of strategy, where you're leveraging third-party administrators, independent stop-loss carriers, pharmacy solution providers, and a variety of different what we call bolt-on point solutions to purchase the various different aspects of your healthcare program. So accessing primary care, accessing pharmacy, different contracts than a traditional carrier network way of accessing inpatient, outpatient care. And so that model, again, lends itself to a lot of advantages from a cost control, transparency standpoint. And again, there are overlaps. So there are ways that if a particular carrier network is really important for your population, there are ways to overlap and leverage some of those components of a group independent type of model. So that's all part of really understanding options, expanding your sight line outside of just a traditional insurance product and beginning to understand the different things that are available to you, different strategies that are available to you, and how that can help you accomplish the goals that you have. So we'll move to the next strategy. So after we start to expand our sight line, we start to see some different opportunities in the market. How do we then play the insurance card, right? How do we leverage insurance in a way that makes sense for our business? And what we hear often is we kind of have two options. We have option A being fully insured, or we have option B being self-insured. And what we see in the market is it's way more extensive than just simply looking at two options. You really have to think about it more like a spectrum, where on one side we have fully insured, and on the other side we have fully self-insured, meaning we have no insurance at all. And in between those, there's a lot of different ways that we can begin to structure how you finance your healthcare and how we leverage insurance. So there are hybrid models, level funding, self-insured through a carrier. We have self-insured through an independent third-party administrator. Large organizations that have the volume to self-insure without insurance may do so, and they don't buy any insurance whatsoever. That's typically geared for larger employers that have tens of thousands of employees. There are ways in a fully insured environment that you can begin to take on some variable cost through reimbursement types of strategies as well. So as you move down the spectrum from left to right, again, you start to have greater data transparency. You start to take on a little bit more of that variable cost risk, but you also have the reward, meaning when you have positive claims years, you're not spending what you would have in a fixed cost, fully insured type of product. And you begin to have more plan sponsor control. So you can begin to implement some of the programs that Bruce will highlight here in a few minutes to improve the quality of access for your people. So think about it less as we got to buy a fully insured product or a self-insured product, and more as we have the spectrum, and let's really get to the sweet spot of where on this spectrum is the right risk tolerance for you as a leader and your organization as an overall group. Bruce, anything to add here?
Well, one strategy that we've employed is we've joined what's known as a healthcare captive in order to reduce our healthcare spending risk. And we joined an organization called Pareto Captive Services back in December of 2017. But what a captive does, and this is particularly unique for, people that are providing self-insurance, that are maybe a little bit on the smaller side, from say 50 to, maybe 1,000 or a few thousand employees. But what this does, it basically unites a group of companies in a risk-sharing arrangement. And so each company, they have their own claims risk that they share, and then there's a layer of risk that all companies that are in the captive share together. And then really, really high claims are paid for and are the responsibility of a reinsurer. But the idea in a captive is that it sort of reduces the volatility that a lot of self-insured plans experience on a year-to-year basis. It sort of levels it out. And the other thing that a lot of captives do is they work very aggressively on cost containment solutions.
Thanks for highlighting that, Bruce. And that's one of the big pieces that we hear a lot in the market as well. We feel like we're too small to be self-insured, or we're concerned about cash flow volatility. And so buying coalitions, healthcare captives can be a really effective solution to begin to manage those risks and that volatility in a different way. So appreciate you sharing that. And there are a lot of really good competitive options out there that have different value propositions. So it's important for plan sponsors to, again, understand the options that they have and really select a partner that's going to be a good fit. So Bruce talked a little bit about one of the pieces is they help manage cost. So when we think about a group health plan, one of your big drivers, as I mentioned earlier, is the actual cost of a claim. And in any group health plan, what we typically see is that 20% of the population drives 80% of claims. So kind of that typical Pareto principle that we see in so many different settings. But when we have such a small group of members in your population that are driving a big portion of claim, it becomes really important to prioritize managing those large claim populations and beginning to bring solutions that can help manage the high cost claimants. And we could even take it down to maybe the top 5% of your population. Because if we manage those really well, then the cost of the health plan and the claims experience really begins to stabilize in a really positive manner, because those are the things that are driving the claims. That's what, when we think about how a budget might quote unquote blow up from a cost standpoint, it's those large claimants. It's not the physical therapy. It's not the labs and diagnostics. Well, we don't want overuse of ER for a variety of reasons. Even overuse of ER is not going to blow up a health plan. It's the high cost pharmacy. It's the major specialties, outlier patients. Those are the things that are really driving huge cost. And then long term, it's chronic diseases that are not being managed and leading to some of these high cost surgeries. So Bruce, we've got a couple areas that we've prioritized within your health plan highlighted here. Share a little bit more about what you guys are doing within your health plan strategy. Let's start with pharmacy, because we know that's such a low-hanging fruit, and it's a major driver right now for many plan sponsors.
Yeah, I think pharmacy is a really important one, and it's really one of the easiest things to fix. It's interesting, though, a lot of companies that are probably in the fully insured space, they have a PBM or a pharmaceutical benefit manager that really play a lot of games. They play a lot of games with your formulary, and they have high cost drugs on their formulary that cost your company both from a plan sponsor and an employee standpoint. Some of them have side deals with big pharma that give them rebates for, say, name brand and more expensive drugs. So one of the things that we implemented almost from day one was a transparent PBM relationship that only charges us a transaction fee for drugs, and allows us to carve out high cost drugs to another vendor. And that other vendor, what they do is they leverage manufacturers assistance programs, or they source drugs internationally. And the point is that it saves the plan a heck of a lot of money, and plan members pay nothing out of pockets when they go this route.
Yeah, the pharmacy side too, from what we see, it's a very competitive market. So when we can begin to take the pharmacy benefit contract and leverage it in the market and actually go out and have competitive pricing and competitive proposals, we can generally see, number one, more favorable contract terms, lower cost, but we can also give the plan sponsor greater control over that formulary. And then how we source those high cost brand and specialty drugs becomes a critical ingredient, because we can begin to source those not through many different layers of middlemen, but source those directly from the manufacturer. And typically it's a fraction of the cost, but oftentimes it is at no cost to the member and no cost to the plan. So it's really, really powerful strategies that we can begin to stabilize the pharmacy spend and just think about it a little bit differently. Bruce, talk a little bit about the major specialties, outlier patients, some of the things that the Fasco plan's doing to address some of those high cost medical claims.
Well, as you mentioned, a lot of times it might just be a handful of individuals on your plan that are driving most of the cost. And in 2023, we instituted a program. It's run by Edison Health, and it basically it's based on a second opinion methodology, because there's a lot of surgeries that are considered to be unnecessary, a lot of back surgeries and so forth. There's a lot of cancer diagnoses that are misdiagnosed. So it's really important to have a second opinion before you just start down a course of treatment. And so if a surgery, for instance, is recommended, Edison Health will typically review, and they will either concur or not concur. They may suggest an alternative treatment. If a treatment or if a surgery is necessary, the employee can have that surgery done at an Edison facility at no cost to themselves. And it typically saves the plan money because it's a bundled price, a price that is within certain limitations, pretty much guaranteed. So if there's a complication that arises, it's really on Edison's dime, not the health plan.
All right, awesome. So those are two low-hanging fruit, high-cost programs and strategies, and there's a variety of different ways. Bruce has mentioned a couple of the different vendor names specifically, but there are a variety of different ways and programs that plan sponsors can adopt to start to address some of those low-cost things. The third area that we have on here that we feel is really important and a critical ingredient to any high-performing health plan, any health plan that really needs to be built for its people, is primary care. We know that there's a great shortage of primary care in the traditional market. Primary care can be very difficult to access. So even if you have health insurance, even if you have 100% preventive services covered under your plan, which any ACA compliant plan will have, it can be very difficult to actually get in and see a primary care doctor. Long wait times, 4 to 6 weeks, I think is an average wait time in many markets. Many providers aren't accepting new patients. So even if there's a great network with lots of participation within your geographic area, a lot of times doctors aren't seeing new patients. So we know that primary care is really difficult to access today. Bruce, how have you guys been able to address and begin to think about primary care differently?
Well, what we did is we looked at a lot of different options, but we eventually chose a provider called HealthBar, who actually brings a nurse practitioner on site for 2 days a week. And this means employees can actually get primary care right on site. And they use this for things like checkups, chronic disease management like diabetes, pre and post-op monitoring. We use it for workers' comp triage and most of our lab work. So if you have a primary care physician already, it kind of supplements the relationship. If you don't have one, then you have a primary care option that you can get right at work. And we found that it really cuts down on unnecessary visits to urgent care and ER. And we have a direct contract with a laboratory, and you get all your labs done, through this primary care option, and those are free to employees, and it saves the plan an incredible amount of money as well. And we pay a capitated rate. In other words, we pay one fee for each employee and their family, and they have unlimited access to the nurse practitioner.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's been a great partnership and really a growing model. We know that there's a lot of a lot of interest in on-site clinics, near-site clinics, and there's again good use cases for those. But the access to primary care through a strategy called direct primary care, however you execute it, whether it's a program like Health Bar, on-site, near-site clinic, virtual, there are the fundamental idea is that you're paying a per employee per month fee, and employees have access to those providers at no cost, 24/7, and they're really engaging with the member in a very different way, which leads us into the fourth area, which is really designing the member experience. And while there are technologies and different programs that can be a part of this conversation, we believe primary care really needs to be a central part of designing the member experience. And Bruce started the conversation out today talking about a member that gave him feedback that because of this program, they literally saved my life. And that idea is that the nurse that's on site with the Fasco team is really the quarterback for healthcare. So in our communications and our messaging with the Fasco team, we encourage them that unless it's an emergent situation, Nurse Ryan is the one that's on site. Nurse Ryan is your first point of contact for any healthcare need. So members are beginning to go to Nurse Ryan, whether it's on site through an appointment or it's a phone call, and leverage him to navigate through the healthcare journey. Because no matter how much we communicate during open enrollment, how much we push out via newsletters throughout the year, when employees really care about their healthcare is when they're experiencing a claim issue, right? They have their little girl falls out of a tree and they need to get to the ER. They need to navigate through the ortho journey on that, which my little girl did that a few years ago. So I'm speaking from firsthand experience on that one. But that's when you need healthcare. That's when you care about how your health plan works and how it coverage, and having that member experience designed in a way that supports the member at the time of claim is so critical. Bruce, anything to add to the member experience perspective?
No, the only thing I would add is that no matter how you design your plan, healthcare is it's still very complicated. And so when you have a nurse practitioner on site that understands the ins and outs of your plan, that really helps our members navigate a very complicated system.
Yeah. And not only the plan structure, but also the healthcare system. They understand the healthcare system. They understand how to work with provider offices and hospitals, and they understand all of those different components. And then they can begin to help educate the member and help them navigate that journey. So that's a really important ingredient. If you don't have a primary care solution that can sit in that seat, again, there are other solutions that can either support or fulfill that function, and plan sponsors designing that can really create a very different experience. So one of the solutions that many of our clients adopt measures satisfaction through a program called the Net Promoter Score. And when they look at their Net Promoter Score of the members that are using healthcare through that service, it's in the mid 80s, which would be equivalent to like a Ritz-Carlton type of customer service experience and the scores that the Ritz-Carlton gets. When we look at that same measurement criteria using traditional health insurance, it's usually 14, 15, 16, somewhere in there, which would be comparable to like a utility company, meaning there's not high satisfaction there. So it's a very different member experience, and we can begin to create different outcomes as we help members navigate the journey as well. The last item that we want to highlight, last strategy before we jump into some Q&A here, is just the importance of leadership. And Bruce mentioned some of these, so we won't go through every component, but it's important to have data in every other aspect of our business. Business owners, finance leaders, HR leaders, you use data to drive strategic business decisions. Healthcare should be no different. We need data to be able to drive the strategic decisions that we make relative to the third largest expense on our balance sheet. So data is really, really important. It's something that leaders need to prioritize from the folks they're working with. Employee feedback can be really positive. One thing we caution here is we don't want the vocal minority to determine the strategy of the business and the health plan approach. Meaning, if we have one or two people that are complaining about a network and not having access to certain networks, that can't drive the entire health plan strategy. And we see that far too often. It's important that we have really good access strategy, but we can't let that vocal minority dictate strategy. So leveraging employee surveys, really important, leveraging exit interview feedback. We have some organizations that use tools for statistical preferencing, meaning we determine priorities from employees based on what they're willing to give up. So there are some really effective ways that we can leverage formal employee feedback and begin to look at trends. So that certainly is a piece of it. We just caution leaders, again, not to let that vocal minority determine strategy. Change management is something that's really, really important as we think about moving away from something we've done for 20, 30 years to something a little bit different. It's really important that we have really effective change management strategies and approaches. Along with that is the communication piece. We need to make sure that we're communicating frequently, often. It's not just sharing information, but it's really marketing the program. It's communicating value around the program. And leveraging a variety of different communication tools to communicate to your audience and your workforce. So for some people, they might learn really well through an auditory open enrollment meeting type of verbal communication. Others might want to dig in and read. Others might really like a quick 90-second video explaining the direct primary care program. So having a multi-media and multi-source different communication strategy we find is really effective. And then the last is just really thinking about your goals and values. What is it that you want to accomplish through your health plan? What does winning look like? If it's stabilizing rates, if it's, hey, we need to cut costs by 20%, if it's freezing health premium contributions from your employees, as Fasco's done, really think about what those goals are, and then what are the values that are going to provide the guardrails for decision making. Aligning your team and having those clearly defined goals and values is a really important part of this overall strategy for leadership. Bruce?
The one thing that I would add to this is that our company, you know, we're open book management and we have profit sharing. And I think it's been really positive, and it's something that we've just started this journey. But I think getting people to understand that, you know, when you overpay for healthcare services, now we're not talking about not getting healthcare, but when you overpay, when you choose lower value providers, that has an impact on the bottom line. It's like overpaying for steel or overpaying for other materials that you buy in the manufacturing process. So that's been, I think, a real important tool that you know, we're starting to use to educate our employees, and we want to continue to move in that direction as we go forward.
Awesome. Well, Bruce, on this topic, one of the questions that was posed, how have you been able to gain buy-in amongst your HR and finance teams to implement some of these strategies?
Well, I'm the boss, for one thing. Well, for one thing, I think, you know, it's been, for me, I've been very involved, you know, from day one in this process. And I think you know, our team shares, I think, a lot of the common interests, which is, you know, one, to try to improve the benefits offerings, but also be cognizant of keeping a handle on cost. And, if you're in the HR space, then you realize that, the last 4 or 5 years, or since COVID, I should say, the traditional playbook, for attracting people hasn't really been too effective. So I think there's been an open-mindedness because, hey, if an improved benefit package, and making certain changes to bring that about is necessary, then, we're ready and willing to play ball.
Awesome. Well, folks, we're going to begin to transition into our Q&A for the last 8 minutes or so that we have. And so go ahead and submit those via the Q&A function, and we will answer a couple of them that we have in queue now. But while you're getting your questions submitted, we'll leave you with this final slide as a formal part of the presentation wraps up. Is one of the big pieces that we really challenge and encourage our plan sponsors and our partners to begin to shift is to begin thinking long term. So the insurance industry has done a great job of training plan sponsors to think about this in 12-month buying cycles. So we go through an annual renewal cycle. I call it the annual train wreck of employee benefit renewals. And we go through, we have limited time, we have limited options, and we really aren't making data-driven strategic decisions over the course of, hey, what's best for the next 3 to 5 years? And it creates a very problematic pattern of how we're making decisions around the health plan strategy. And so if we can begin to think about long-term strategy, what does this look like over the next 3 to 5 years? When we get that 6% increase, what a lot of plan sponsors do is they make a $60,000 decision. That's this top line here in the trend. And that $60,000 decision, when it's compounded year over year over year, is actually more closely aligned to a $250,000 decision, because those rates compound. That 6% compounds on the year after, or the year before, and the year before that. And sometimes it's 12%, sometimes it's 3%. But we have to start thinking about it, okay, over time, if this compounds, where are we going in 5 years? What we find when we begin to unpack some of these different strategies, we begin to look at some of the alternative options, we generally can find a conservative minimum 10% savings, which is represented by this opportunity line. And then our book of business is running at about 2% year over year trend versus industry traditional averages of about 6%. So even if we did nothing else outside of just year one, we start to look at pharmacy, we start to look at some of these major outlier move maybe from fully insured to self-insured and cut some of those expenses that are tied to that, we can begin to stabilize the spend. And when you look at the cumulative impact, that's almost $1 million of savings over 5 years. So it's really impactful when we start to think about this more on a long-term basis. So let's jump in to some Q&A. So there are times that we hear concern about cash flow volatility of a self-insured plan. Any ideas? Bruce, do you want to share your thoughts on that? You touched on that a little bit with the captive conversation.
Well, I mean, I guess, yeah, that's always a concern, but, if you have like if you have major issues, eventually your self-funded, your stop loss premium or your stop loss coverage kicks in. So for instance, if you have an individual liability of say $55,000, and you get like a really big claim, depending on the type of contract you have with your stop loss provider, once you hit that $55,000 threshold, that becomes the carrier's responsibility. You probably know a little bit more about that, Brian, than I do.
Yeah, if we kind of think back to that financing spectrum, there are a number of different ways to structure, depending on the size of your organization and the the tolerance for risk, just the nature of the business. Some organizations are very cyclical in terms of their busy seasons and cash flow. And so there are different ways that you can structure. If you're in a traditional self-insured, a lot of that is looking at your stop loss and setting up different parameters and different components within the contract. And then if you're a little bit smaller organization, there are some hybrid models called level funding that can be a really effective way at stabilizing, still maintaining that self-insured environment, but stabilizing your actual spend. So it looks and feels more like a fully insured environment versus a traditional self-insured where you have those claim spikes. So those are all good things to talk with an advisor about that has expertise in self-insuring, because there are very viable ways to manage the volatility concern, which is a very real concern. But the markets responded with some great solutions. We have one more question. What is the name of the primary care program you suggested? So Bruce and his team at Fasco use a program called Health Bar, which is an awesome company, been a great partner, and they do a fantastic job. There are a variety of other models to adopt direct primary care. And so from our perspective, we always believe that it's just really important to do an overall assessment of what's available to you, and then you can start to back into a program that makes the most sense and is a good fit, which is what the Fasco team has done. So great question. Any other questions? You can get them submitted, or Elizabeth, I don't know if we're live with audio.
So if we are going to be closing it up, it's 10:58.
Okay.
So thanks everybody for joining us, and we are going to stick around for a few minutes. So if you have questions that you really would like to get answered, we'll have time for you to personally speak with Brian and Bruce, for you to ask your questions personally, since we're coming up to time. With that, I want to thank you for joining us. If you haven't already signed up for the MGA newsletters, I highly recommend doing so you can stay on top of future events such as this. You can sign up for a newsletter at our homepage on our webpage, mgalliance.org. And like I indicated, I will be sharing out these slides. You will also be provided Ryan's contact information if you would like to speak with him personally, as well as you'll gain access to the recording so you can share it with your team if you're so interested. And Brian, I'll turn it over to you and Bruce for a short close.
Bruce, go ahead, sir.
Well, thank you for having me. I hope that, that you learned something. If there's something, some question or something you want to know specifically about the Fasco experience, feel free to reach out to me.
Thank you, Bruce.
Awesome. Well, Bruce, I want to thank you for carving out some time to share your story. I think that's a really important part of this. And for those of you managing a group health plan, while it is a difficult environment and it can feel like there's no hope, just know that there are viable ways to begin to address some of the challenges that we started out talking about. And I'm really excited about where the market's going. I'm excited about some of the things that we see changing in a positive way. There's legislation that has been positive, Consolidated Appropriations Act, and just some different things that we see going on in the market. We're starting to feel that this shift is occurring in a really positive way. So I want to leave you with that hope that there's a good path forward for your business and for your people. And we're happy to be a part of whatever those conversations may look like or sound like. So thank you for attending. We appreciate everyone's time and attention today.
Thank you, Brian.